First fireball took the sky. A bloom of orange ripped open by a shaped charge under Eldridge's midnight cranes. It lit the Costa warehouse like a sacrament burned in reverse. Then scattered shadows broke across steel, and a chorus of automatic gunfire stitched through stacked pallets of imported electronics. Masked soldiers moved in tight formation toward the office suite, ghosting beneath the screech of gulls and the wail of distant sirens, each one marked by the black dragon insignia of Viktor Dragunov. Fragile peace, never more than an illusion stretched thin over cold iron, tore clean down the middle. Emilio Costa arrived minutes after the flames took hold, his Mercedes nosing through smoke like a shark parting silk. He stepped into chaos with calculated calm, thick hands folded behind his back, gaze sweeping every angle. Stocky and graying, his presence alone slowed the panic. He knelt beside a wounded foreman, pressed a cloth, nodded once. "Who signed off the night roster?" he asked, voice low. Answers came in fragments: a new shift lead, a shifted manifest, a strange truck. Emilio's jaw hardened. Dragunov's people had moved before dawn, precise and assured. It was an invitation, the kind you answered with a ledger and a body count. In the back room of La Serena, the restaurant Emilio used as his heart valve, the inner circle gathered. Rico Valent, shaved head gleaming under the stained tin ceiling, paced like a caged bull. Lena Marquez sat at the end of the table, posture straight, hair tied back, eyes collecting detail as if every breath belonged to her inventory. Emilio poured espresso as if measuring war. "He cut us at the docks, he wants a flood," Emilio said. "We answer, but we don't spill so much we drown ourselves." He gave Rico a look that acknowledged both trust and leash. Rico moved before the meeting ended. He knew Dragunov's lieutenants by scent, the ones who strutted outside clubs and counted envelopes with fingers too clean. An alley behind the Eldridge boxing gym turned into thunder. Rico's fist met jaw, elbow found ribs, a pistol kissed the cold. "Where's the handler on the docks?" he asked the bleeding man, hot breath condensing in winter air. The answers were half-truths and curses. Rico squeezed them into two names and the address of a freight yard turned safe house. He hit it hard that night, 2 trucks and a steel door peeled back, operatives dumped in the gutter. It made a statement. It also put the city on high alert and dragged heat into the lanes Lena preferred invisible. Lena's suspicion began with a ledger line that didn't reconcile, a phantom crate listed under a vendor Costa never touched. She followed it to a burner phone tucked behind a restroom vent and a pattern. Every time Dragunov struck, someone knew which cameras to kill and which gate chiefs to spin. She set a trap, scheduling a high-value shipment with a fake route and a cloned manifest. When the wrong gate crew prepared at the wrong time, Lena watched the mole's shadow cross steel. "We have a leak," she told Emilio, voice steady. "Internal and close." The room cooled. Eyes drifted toward a veteran lieutenant whose loyalty had once felt like brick. Emilio kept the investigation quiet. Men were pulled aside, questioned with seasoned calm. Lena's breadcrumbs led to a port coordinator with 15 years in the family, soft hands, soft smile, hard bank account. When Rico cornered him by the tank farm, the man cried and claimed fear and debt. "My kid, he needs," Rico's knuckles answered. "We all need," he snarled and dragged the traitor in. Emilio watched the broken confession without blinking. "You believe cruelty changes equations," Lena told Rico later under humming lights. "Sometimes it only obscures them." Detective Clara She had been living inside that obscurity for months. As a civilian compliance officer in the Port Authority on paper and a patient hunter for truth by vocation, she threaded the seams between city and syndicate. Her shoulder-length blonde hair and focused gaze gave her a blend-in mask. She recorded conversations about building inspectors paid to look away, union bosses who laundered hours into cash, and a police lieutenant who treated Dragunov like a favored contractor. Every step forward stained the edges of her moral map. She wanted the city clean, the city wanted order at any cost. She found her way to Emilio through a priest who refused to absolve anyone lying to themselves. The meeting took place in the nave of a half-renovated church, scaffolding framing the saints like a stage set. "You think this is about me," Emilio said. "It's about Eldridge. Victor wants to rule it like a man rules a cage." Clara held up a folded photocopy of a ledger page. "And you want to rule it like a man rules his family. I can't bless either." They agreed to something narrower than trust, a momentary alignment. She would take the corrupt officials, he would take Dragunov. If their paths crossed, they would not lie and they would not hesitate. Victor struck back where Emilio bled pride. Lena went to meet a contact tied to city procurement. She never arrived. A video arrived instead, shot under the harsh light of a slaughterhouse. Lena was bound to a bolted chair, eyes unflinching. Victor's voice, cold and fluent, rolled like machinery. "South Docks, Emilio," he said. "Give me the lanes or she's meat, or deliver Rico's head since his honor is heavier than your profits." Emilio sat alone with the video, then with a photograph of his children, then with a glass he did not drink. The steel veil of Eldridge did not crack, but it pressed, and every prayer he'd never offered rose like smoke. Rico did not wait for permission to breathe. He rallied 6 men he trusted with his life and his anger, loading into a van painted with maintenance decals. Lena's last signal pinged an abandoned canning plant near the rail spur, concrete ribs fanged with rebar, windows blind. Rico's team moved without conversation, hot-headed focus channeling into a dancer's economy. The first guard went down with a suppressed shot, the second with a knife that found the gap beneath a Kevlar vest. Sirens did not come. Dragunov's timing had been chosen to fold over police shift changes and Union picket lines. In the main hall, Rico saw Lena under a light, Victor's silhouette high on the catwalk like a judge with an axe. "You're predictable," Victor called. "Honor is a leash." Rico's answer was movement. He rolled a flashbang under a rusted conveyor, leaped before the whitewash took eyes and balance. The clash was a collage, boots on steel, grunts, glass shattering in a rhythm. Rico reached Lena, cut the ties, took a grazing wound along his ribs that burned like the first slap of sun in winter. Lena stood on her own. "You brought war," she said without reproach, and fired 3 shots in succession that dropped 2 men on the platform. They moved in tandem, old training twisting violence into kind of choreography. Victor withdrew into smoke and curses, and the plant became a bell rung for every faction in Eldridge. Lena didn't leave it there. The rescue had bought her leverage. Within 48 hours, she arranged a meeting with Dragunov through a cutout in the city's procurement office in a glass cube overlooking the river, a truce disguised as negotiation. "You don't beat us by burning," she told him, voice cool and even as ever. "You beat us by contracts we can't cut and favors we can't refuse." Dragunov studied her, the lines of his stern face set like a carving. She slid evidence across the table, documents tying him to councilmen, to inspectors, to the police Lieutenant Clara had been tracking. "You think this helps you," Victor said. "It helps me more." Lena smiled thinly. "It exposes the truth that you're not a king, you're a client." Revelation hit like a second explosion, invisible but wrecking. Inside Emilio's circle, men began to wonder who they served, the family, the city, or a machine fed by both. Clara saw it too, staring at her board in a rented room, pins connecting names to lines that overlapped until they blurred. Dragunov was not just the rival, he was the blade held by Eldridge's official hand. The hierarchy did not tower, it intertwined. Lena's truce offer was not surrender, it was a scalpel, designed to slice free a portion of power to stop the bleeding long enough to reassemble the patient. Emilio walked alone along the rail tracks behind La Serena, smoke from distant refineries painting a curtain over the moon. He thought of his father, who had taught him that loyalty was a currency backed by violence. He thought of Rico, who would die for honor, of Lena, who would live for clarity, of his children, who'd never asked for their last name to weigh so much. He went home, sat at a kitchen table in a house too quiet, and wrote out the names of officials Clara had flagged, then folded the list and placed it in an envelope addressed not to a judge, not to a priest, but to a reporter who did not owe him anything. The final confrontation took place in the skeleton of the old steel mill, a cathedral of rivets under a roof that had known more fire than sky. Victor arrived with a contingent dressed in suits that looked like declarations. Emilio brought Rico, Lena, and men whose eyes held a record of nights too long. Clara came in alone, badge under her coat, moral compass inside a heart pulled both ways. "You hand me the docs," Victor said, voice cutting quiet. "You hand me the man who keeps hitting me like he wants the past back." Emilio's face did not change. "I hand you nothing." He nodded to Clara. She had done something dangerous. She had signed arrest warrants for officials who had nurtured Dragunov's ascent, and she had leaked the timing to both men to prevent slaughter that would rot the city deeper. It placed her at the intersection of law and streets with no easy turn. The mill's air thickened. Men shifted. A radio crackled with the sound of sirens outside, a wall of blue and red converging on offices and homes, not on the mill. Victor realized the ground under his boots had been traded for sand. He raised his gun, a tremor in hands that had crafted fear into a tool. Rico stepped forward, body between Emilio and Dragunov, and took a shot that ripped through his shoulder. He did not drop. He lifted his own weapon, fire spilling across open steel. Lena moved left, took down the 2 men who had aimed for Clara. The exchange was brutal and short, the kind of thunder that rolls in and rolls out with nothing left to say. Victor went down hard, a bloom of dark under his suit. His eyes found Emilio one last time, trying to convert a stare into gravity. "You'll feed them again," he whispered, meaning the city, the machine. Emilio stood above him, the steel beneath his polished shoes cold as unblessed earth. "Maybe," he said, "but not with your knives." Rico stumbled, turned to Lena, who pressed her hand over blood and kept pressure with the same firmness she used to seal deals. Clara exhaled a prayer she wasn't sure belonged to any church. In the days that followed, Eldridge ran on sirens and headlines. The corrupt, lifted out of their offices, looked small against the city's wide frame. Emilio had chosen to expose a piece of the system that protected him, gambling that a shift in the official order would reframe the underworld's lattice. He ceded no lanes, but he redrew maps, handing Lena oversight and reducing Rico's leash while honoring the fact that he'd earned his place with blood. "Honor is more than the willingness to kill," Emilio told him, arm around the man's good shoulder. "It's the willingness to hold when every instinct says strike." Clara watched the city breathe differently. Some of the rot had been scraped, not all. She filed reports, typed with clarity, and signed with a hand that trembled only after she finished. Her choices had tested the bounds of 2 codes and found a third, the one people write when they are tired of the first 2 failing them. She met Emilio once more in daylight outside La Serena. "You did it," she said. He shook his head. We did a peace. They parted with no promise to be friends and no guarantee they would not need each other again. Eldridge settled into a new rhythm, the steel veil intact but thinner, the machinery behind it noisier with consequence. Victor's faction fractured, and those who tried to stitch it back together found their thread eaten by the public's sudden appetite for accountability. Lena negotiated contracts like a surgeon, cutting away fat to leave muscle. Rico healed, scar shining where honor had collected. Emilio remained at the center, not as a king but as a quiet engine, choosing restraint where noise had once dictated victory. He'd paid a price, the understanding that every choice in such a city carried a ledger of unseen debt, but he had kept the one thing he believed mattered, the gravity of loyalty. Drawn lines held, but they were written over sand. In the small hours when smoke leaned over the river and trains sighed into the dark, Eldridge whispered to itself, victory had not made it gentler, loyalty had not made it fair. But beneath the steel veil, where men and women chose who they stood beside and who they refused to become, a legacy had been sealed in grit and sacrifice, in the decision to cut cleaner instead of deeper. In the shadows of Eldridge, where loyalty cuts deeper than steel and betrayal stains every victory, remember what you stand for, like and subscribe for more stories.